thanks for joining us again for another episode of the podcast from communicationssteroids.com.
I'm Roger Pike, and I wanted to extend my personal welcome too. I don't get a chance to do that very often because you always introduce the podcast. And so it's my turn. I am happy to be here, and I hope you are too.
I know you've done it before, but not a problem. You can do it again. I usually drive the machine, but you can put your hands on the wheel and shift.
Yeah. By the way, who are you?
I'm Tim Gordon. We want to really talk about a couple of things today on our podcast, and we'll probably spend 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, but really it's kind of looking at the resources for speakers or people that want to be speakers, and I think we're coming from just a couple of places for this particular podcast. And one is, if you've never given a speech before, you've given maybe one or two, you maybe got suckered into at work to give a presentation at a meeting, and you're thinking, oh, God, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that came off. Or maybe a luncheon, you were asked to give a 10-minute review or something, and you just walked away from it thinking, there's got to be a better way.
And you realized you were in over your head, maybe it didn't go as well as you'd hoped, you were overwhelmed, and thought there's got to be something that can help me do this better next time.
And the second place would be?
Well, you're a relatively experienced speaker. Maybe you've given a few, you even got to the point where you almost enjoyed it, but you want to take it to the next level. You want to go from being a comfortable speaker to being a truly good one.
One of the places we would recommend you go, and we think this is a great place to go to learn and get comfortable with the idea of speaking, and that is a Toastmasters group. Every city's really got a couple of Toastmasters groups. Some of them have many, many of them. And there are pros and cons to Toastmasters, but I think there's a lot of pros which outweigh any cons.
Yeah, I do too. It's one of the best-known groups of its kind. There have been others that have followed that model, but it's really a good place to get your feet wet in public speaking, and it's a good place to start getting feedback. Now, it's not going to be the kind of intense training and the kind of one-on-one intense training that maybe you need if you are planning to do this as part of your career, or you feel like you need to do it as part of your career. But it is a darn good place to get started, and a darn good place to begin getting feedback and learning what it is you need to do to get better.
At Toastmasters, I think the best thing I liked about Toastmasters was a very friendly environment, a very safe environment. You do get positive reinforcement, you do get feedback, you do learn, and you do it at your own pace. And that's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you're very ambitious, you can get a long ways fairly quickly. But even then, if it's a very active Toastmasters club, you're still going to be somewhat limited. And on the flip side of that is if you go at your own pace and your pace is, okay, I'm going to do 2 speeches this year, you're not going to make much progress. And so I think that you should, if you're going to become a professional speaker, you should really sort of graduate from Toastmasters fairly quickly. Go through their basics of their program, get used to it, and then move on from that.
Yeah, and so many times you'll find that so much of the criticism that you get, and by criticism I don't mean negative comments. In fact, just exactly the opposite, and that's one of my minor criticisms of Toastmasters, is so much of what you get may be sugar-coated. You're not really being intensely trained, and you're not really being pushed the way that you might be with a personal coach or something like that.
Yeah. You also might look at national speakers bureaus. There are a lot of local or regional or statewide speakers bureaus. They do training sessions. In fact, I'm on an email list for one here in Oregon, and I think just a couple of days ago they offered another training session or an introduction to what the National Speakers Bureau is all about. And for $10, you can go to one of these meetings and find out what basically the levels are you have to reach to become a member of the National Speakers Association.
And they can certainly introduce you to the basics as well. And moreover, they can put you into a sink-or-swim environment. And what I mean by that is to say they can send you out to a place where you're expected to be a speaker.
Yeah.
It's a toss you into the water, and you better do the backstroke.
And also, we talk about online. It's of course, you will look anywhere online, you're going to find a lot of stuff, speaker training, that sort of thing. You might even come across our website or similar websites. And I know I've seen some great programs out there that really do intense one-on-one speaker training that show you how to not only be a speaker, but to sell at the back of the room, as they say. And for these things, you're going to pay several $1,000s,
exactly.
And you're going to be a very it's a pretty high bar to cross, but nonetheless that is out there.
That's
and it might
available.
Be a good resource for you.
I feel like we're playing good cop bad cop here with you talking about each of these possible things and talking about its positives and me coming in the well butts.
So good cop donut, bad cop no donut.
Well, the problem with the internet is you can be so easily overwhelmed. I mean, if you put in to your search engine public speaking training, you're going to get 10,000 hits.
Or 91 million
and 91
index pages.
Million, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really easy to get overwhelmed and to say to heck with it and try and wing it again, which is not a good idea.
And picking something like that without getting basically a reference is really hit and miss. So if you're going to look at those, you might ask around people that you know are public speakers or that have gone through those things. Will give you good insight into what works, what didn't, and maybe they have a good experience with it, or maybe they had a bad one, which will steer you away from it. Another thing, we actually have a couple of books that we'd recommend. One of them that I really enjoyed, read a couple of years ago, is called Speak and Grow Rich, which is sort of a takeoff on the old Think and Grow Rich. It's by Walters and Walters. Very good book if you want to get into what it takes to become a paid public speaker.
Another book, this is one of my personal favorites, and I don't know if it teaches you how to speak so much as how to formulate an argument, and that's by Jerry Spence, a world-famous attorney, and he wrote a book called How to Argue and Win Every Time, and I read the book and thought it was a fabulous primer on organizing your thoughts and formulating an argument. Not just an argument that is academically precise and academically good, but also an argument that sells. And there's a difference. Yeah. Some arguments look good on paper, not so good when you hear them, even though, there's a difference between being right and winning. You can be right and still lose.
Yeah, right.
Jerry teaches you how to be right and win in this book. I like the book a lot.
And if you look at the cover of the book, as we are here on Amazon, it's at home, at work, everywhere, every day. And one of the quotes is, "We were born to make the winning argument just as we were born to walk." So, and argue, people have the wrong connotation of argue. It's like the old Monty Python sketch. This is an argument. Yes, it is. Of course it is.
Well, I remember a class in college that kind of codified it for me, crystallized it in my mind, with the difference between argument and debate. The class was called, and it was the title that sold me on it, was Argumentation and Advocacy. So many people are advocates for something. They're advocates for position. Even if the discussion is, where do we go on vacation this year, you are advocating going to Cabo as opposed to going to
Alaska.
Alaska, exactly. I'm voting for Cabo every time. You are advocating a position, and advocacy is really a better word, but argument is the word that we use when we are advocating a position. And although the word argument has a negative stigma, you shouldn't think of it that way.
One final thing we want to mention is your local library. Boy,
absolutely.
The audiovisual resources that your local library has are just amazing. You can go and check out great speeches on both tape and video, and check out stuff from all the greats. Churchill, JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., Zig Ziglar. The list goes on and on.
When I was just starting as a speaker, this was before Toastmasters. It was before I began competing. And I knew that I wanted to be a good speaker. I wanted to be more than a good speaker. I wanted to be an absolutely fabulous speaker. And the only resource that I had 35 years ago was the library. And
there was no internet then.
I won't give away my age, but there was no internet then. And so the library was what I had, and I went down there, and the first thing I did was look for books, and there were books, and I checked them out and started reading them, and they were dry, they were dry discourses on how to make an argument. But then I happened to wander past the AV Center in the library, the Audiovisual Center, and there were records, of great speeches, and I can remember the first two that I checked out was John Kennedy and Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill's famous, "We shall fight them in the skies, we shall fight them in the beaches, we shall fight them and we shall never, ever surrender." That's a great speech.
It's an excellent
one
speech,
of the greatest speeches ever given. And there are so many elements of great speaking that are included. There's alliteration, there's repetition. I mean, so many of the tools that are used in bringing together your thoughts to make them sell are in that speech. And of course, Kennedy's inaugural address, which is an absolutely fabulous speech. That included the endlessly memorable line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." But you can do that. You can really feel what it's like to put together thoughts in a way that move people, and isn't that what we're trying to do?
Exactly. And I suspect, Roger, that a lot of folks listening to this, if they're young, are just going to go try and YouTube it.
What is that anyway?
There may be some there anyway. But I want to wrap up. We're going to put some of these in our show notes, so there'll be some links down there. Appreciate you listening to the Communication Steroids podcast.
I'm Roger Pike.
And I'm Tim Gordon. Thanks again.